Hey everybody, it's Drive to Work Brain Dump time, except I'm already at work. So I want to get this video done in the car real quick before I head in. I want to talk about Chinese water torture. Why on earth would I waste part of my morning talking about Chinese water torture? So, just to stave off some comments, number one, I'm aware that it's probably not Chinese, and number two, I'm aware that the Mythbusters have evidently tested this and found it plausible. I am not making any statements about the efficacy of Chinese water torture, or the ethics, actually, of doing this. But for those who aren't familiar with what it is, basically an individual is positioned on their back and strapped down or confined in such a way that they cannot move, and some device causes water to drop on their head. And while I'm not sure it's a requirement, I'll go ahead and say that it drops at irregular intervals, because I'm convinced that water dropping at regular intervals would probably be less maddening, because you could maybe pick up a rhythm and do a song to it or something. And I think that an irregular rhythm might help produce anticipation and anxiety. I don't know. I haven't tested this. I haven't spend any time. I'm just kind of sitting here thinking about it. You know, what types of things annoy me? How would this be annoying, and everything else? If you tap yourself on the forehead, it actually hurts just a little bit. I mean, it's not enough to, flip out about, but I would imagine there's a persistent pain aspect to this, and of course the fact that you're strapped down and you can't move, and the being able to watch the water come down and hit you, and just the constant wetness and water dripping down into your eyes. And there are all sorts of factors that certainly could and probably do contribute to the reactions that people have. How do you think you would react strapped down to that table with water dropping on your head? I've thought about this for myself, and I don't know. I mean, that's true for all sorts of situations. I'm a human being. I can empathize. I can put myself in those situations in a fictional sense and say, if I was in this situation, I would be unflappable. I mean, that's, obviously your ego stepping in saying, I could definitely take this, or I'm going to always do the noble and right thing. But it may turn out when you actually get in the situation where you thought you were going to do something noble, you actually do something more cowardly, or you're not quite as noble as you thought you were. And it may be, if you find yourself undergoing Chinese water torture, that you cave a lot faster than you expected to. I would think that because we're all just a little bit different, that the reactions would be varied, with people flipping out to different degrees at different times. And so if you imagine, for example, let's say I've undergone this and I made it 6 hours. And at the 6-hour mark, I was incredibly agitated and demanding to be released. If you haven't experienced it at all, you're not really equipped to assess what I experienced. But let's say we take a third person, and they are on the table for about 10 minutes. And they are really seriously flipping out, screaming, asking to be let up. If you, as someone who's never experienced it, look at them and say, oh, come on now, it's just a drop of water, you're kind of a dick. Because it's not just a drop of water. You're misrepresenting it. But even if it was, it's still somebody there who's experiencing trauma. Hey, you didn't freak out to the last 4 drops. Why is it that this is the one that you're going to freak out to? Because they're not freaking out over that one drop. They're freaking out over this persistent systemic problem. All the drops that came before it contribute to that. But it doesn't just have to be the person who's never experienced it doing this. I made it 6 hours. If I look down at that person who's freaking out after 10 minutes and say, oh, come on, what's wrong with you? You're obviously just freaking hypersensitive. I made it 6 whole hours. You can't make it 10 minutes? Are you kidding me? Then I'm being a dick. Because I'm assuming that my experience is typical. Or, even if 35 people all lasted 6 hours, the person who only made it 10 minutes, telling them, oh, come on now, you're just being ridiculous, you're hypersensitive, we all made it 6 hours, you can't make it 10 minutes, you're just adding insult to injury. You're presuming that there's something wrong with the fact that this individual can't make it as far as somebody else. Why don't you just flick some extra water at him too? Then you can be like slime. I think the Chinese water torture is a fairly good analogy for things like racism, sexism, bullying, bigotry, the effects of this on people. It's one of those things where, of course, all analogies break down at some point, and this analogy will break down as well, in the sense that I can actually go lay down on a table and configure something to drop water on me and kind of get a feel for Chinese water torture, whereas it's pretty difficult for me to actually experience what it's like to be gay and be bullied for being gay, or to be a woman and be harassed for being a woman, or to be black and be harassed for being black. It's not possible for me to put myself in the situations where I can truly experience what it's like to have your identity constantly assailed, or even just seemingly constantly assailed. But it doesn't fail entirely, because in order for me to really experience the Chinese water torture, I can't just go get some friends of mine to strap me down and set up a water bucket. Because if I pick my friends, I have a pretty good confidence that they're actually going to let me up. That whenever I start to freak out, they're going to, they're going to say, I'm friends with this individual, they're asking for help, let me help them. And they're going to let me up. And so there's always an obvious escape route for me when I'm attempting to experience Chinese water torture. And that makes it unequal. In order to really experience it, I'd have to be tortured by people I didn't know, who I sincerely thought were unlikely to let me up. No analogy is going to be perfect. And I already anticipate that some people are going to say, oh gosh, really? You're comparing sexism and racism to torture? Are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding. And thanks for saying it's just a water drop, because that's pretty much what you did. What these people are experiencing is nothing like torture. How do you know? When we talk about things like child abuse, we're not talking about just beating children. There's emotional and mental abuse that goes along with this. There's the process of devaluing and belittling. I would hope that we were working to create a world in which people strive to become better human beings, so that when you come across somebody laying on a table, having water dripped on their head, who is begging to be removed from that situation, that you'd recognize that saying, oh, come on, it's just a drop of water, makes you an ass. Oh, come on, it can't possibly be that bad. You're an ass. Look, let me flick some extra water at you. Look, see? And look, I can flick it at me too and it doesn't hurt, see? I wouldn't mind if this was happening to me. You're an ass. Oh, I've been through this before and I made it 6 hours. How come you're flipping out after 10 minutes? You're just hypersensitive. Oh my God. Would you stop and shut up your screaming? You are an ass. The best thing you can do? Divert the water. Untie them. Help them up. Stop whoever is dropping the water on them. Tossing them a towel and walking them away is not really helping. Saying that they're not being tortured is not really helping. These are human beings who are experiencing things, and when the harassment and the bullying results in some individuals shutting down, removing themselves from interactions with anybody, and possibly even committing suicide, I'd say that's fucking torture.